Hello, I'm Joyce Woodworth. Welcome to the Spirit of Winona. Across the river from Winona is Latch Island. On the other side of that island stands numerous boathouses. The term boathouses is really a misnomer here because most of the so-called boathouses do not house boats. They're actually river houses with plastic barrels underneath to keep them afloat, and inside are the residences of over 100 or so people, some of whom live year-round in these interesting establishments. Today we're going to take a closer look at these funky houses and meet some of Winona's most unique individuals. The so-called boathouse community lies in Bathhouse Slough, where the old arch wagon bridge stands, and the platform of the iron railroad bridge built in 1892 still hangs over the water, its concrete pedestal standing at the entrance as if entering a special gated community on the Mississippi River. Some of these dwellings are here for the simple purpose of housing a boat, but most have evolved into a weekend vacation home for its owners, and in some cases a permanent residence. The houses are cleverly designed and colorfully painted. Some are large two-story dwellings and others are small. Solar panels and skylights are seen on some. Flowers and plants dress up most of the homes.
Well, I'm looking for the whitest sandy beach where the coconuts within my hands reach. A beautiful girl sings a lullaby, singing to the sea in the tropic sky.
And some have vegetable gardens emitting from pots on their wooden decks. The feeling one gets as you float past these interesting dwellings is a sense of peacefulness and serenity. Without the sounds and commotion of automobile traffic and town noises, one can listen to birds singing and the sounds of the water and the wind. Living on the river allows a bonding with nature, like having a Tom Sawyer experience each day. Jay Koner from Winona, Minnesota enjoyed this existence full-time for 16 years and now uses his boathouse like a weekend cottage.
Kind of a windy night.
Jay shares with us his story of finding this beautiful spot on the Mississippi River and being a carpenter, how he turned it into his home away from home.
Well, shortly after graduation from high school, I had a friend that was living down here in an old boathouse garage that was converted into a living space. And she was out of town for a while and decided to rent her house. And I took her up on the offer, and I moved in, and I was about 19 at the time, and decided this is pretty neat living on the river. I really liked it. So about a year later I bought this house. Didn't have any windows and it was just a single story, and I decided to add some windows and had to insulate it, of course, and had it wired and put a wood stove in it for heat for the winter, of course, and then just had to move in the furniture to make it comfortable. Most of the stuff is recycled that I've gotten out of being a carpenter. I get a lot of used building materials, and got the old tin ceiling, and inside I have some recycled doors and some paneling that's recycled, and there's a little bit in there from the junkyard, some aluminum beams and stuff. And typically I like to do things in the boathouse that I can't do for my clients. They usually want new stuff and things done a little differently. So the boathouse is a place to be a little more creative.
Okay. What are some of the creative things that you think you've done here?
nice on the eaves. It kind of cuts some nice scrolling on the eaves, and a lot of old used stuff. And whenever you take the old used stuff and you put it to use, I think it can be really nice and kind of enhance the feeling of a place.
Okay, now you're living in town right now.
Yeah.
So how do you use your boathouse now?
Well, now I moved off. I think I bought my house in around 96. I moved off the river, and living in a more conventional house, I've gotten rather spoiled, and I have laundry and running water and everything. And so how I use the boathouse now is pretty much on weekends or evenings. I come down here during the summer or the winter also. Winter's very nice because it's quiet and you don't have to deal with the waves or the boats. The house is frozen in, so it doesn't move. And it's more of a place, in 5 minutes I can get from my house to the boathouse, and it's kind of a nice retreat.
Mm-hmm. Well, tell me about any restrictions. Does the city put any restrictions on you living here? Do you have to pay taxes? Tell me what that's all like.
The boathouses, we have an association. We're incorporated, and we have 100 members. And we have a very good relationship with the DNR and the city. It wasn't always good. It took us about 3 years in negotiating with both the city of Winona and the DNR. And we finally came to an agreement, and this agreement has rules, regulations, building codes, all sorts of things that the city and the DNR wanted, and the Boathouse Association realized that it was well worth going along with what they needed to see happen in order for them to allow us to be down here.
Now, you mentioned there's 100 in the association. Are
Yeah.
there 100 boathouses down here, do you think?
Well, the 100 licenses that we have could either be boathouses, boat garages for storing boats, or slips for just pulling a boat into, or something as simple as just a dock. There's a few docks down here, so it's kind of a multi-use area. Of the 100, I would say only 15 are actual residents where people live year-round. It's their primary home. The area where I am, we have access by vehicle, so because of that, we also have electricity right to our houses and phone service. But there's a section of the island called Lower Latch Island, which is actually a separate island, and it has a little footbridge that goes over to get to Lower Latch. There's about maybe 20 feet of water that you have to go over, and it's a little floating footbridge on barrels, and on Lower Latch there's probably 15 or 20 houses there, and that area you can only access by foot or boat, and so there's no electricity in that area other than some of the houses have solar power, and no telephones that I'm aware of. The day of cellular phones, you don't really need power or phone lines anymore. The area of the houses, I think, they kind of developed a little differently. They're more creative, I think, and more of the year-round residents live in that area. It's a little more isolated. They don't get the cars going by, and I think those folks enjoy that area very much. I think it's really a wonderful place. The river, whether you live on it or whether you're in town, I think it's one of the greatest assets that the city of Winona has going for it, along with the bluffs, and hope the city of Winona is smart enough to preserve them and not let the developers take over.
Well, tell me what kind of pleasures you get out of living on the Mississippi or sitting here on your boathouse.
It's peaceful most of the time, except for when the jet skis are flying by. But for the most time, it's a peaceful place, and you can see wildlife from right here. A lot of eagles and herons and osprey, and I enjoy that. And no loud vehicles flying by.
Several docks away from Jay Koner's is Al Kuiak's boathouse. Al also uses his as a second home. Al, tell me how long you've lived here and what you use your cabin for right now.
Okay, I've lived here, I've had the boathouse about 21 years, and I lived in it 18 years, and now I've been living in town for about 3 years. But I come down here every night either to cook or to fish, do a lot of boating out of the boathouse.
Did you build the house yourself?
Actually, it was an old houseboat, and I remodeled the whole thing myself. And that.
Okay.
I'm a contractor by trade, so.
Tell me about the inside.
The inside? I've been working on that for about 20 years. I used to build log homes, and I kind of liked the knotty pine look. So I did the whole inside with knotty pine. And I've got all my antiques and fish and all my junk hanging inside there.
Al has enclosed a small three-season porch on the river end of his boathouse, which is all paneled in knotty pine car siding. If we glance up to the beautifully paneled ceiling, we see a sampling of what Al refers to as junk, but we know they are his treasures. The antiques and sporting trophies are all displayed in a captivating manner, put up there by someone who is a sportsman and obviously a lover of the outdoors. Inside the main cabin, Al has installed a bar, a couch, and a few easy chairs. The paneling in here presents a real cabin look. The wood-paneled ceiling offers the perfect backdrop for Al's collection of tools gathered from his carpentry trade. Several interesting antiques hang from the ceiling, and various collections sit on a shelf that wraps around part of this river sportsman's cottage. Intermingled among Al's tools, we also see the soft side of this man, a group of carefully tended houseplants.
I've really enjoyed living down here and used to burn a lot of wood. It used to be a pretty reasonable way to live. Now, it's gotten a little more expensive, but still well worth it.
Okay. Tell me the pleasure and the feelings that you get of having a house on the river.
Oh, you can't beat it. You just, living on the river is so much different because every day it changes, whether it's the flood or low water or high water, or if you know, a lot of times if the houses ain't maintained, you might have a corner that's sunken, and it's been a pretty good life actually. I really enjoyed it, and I'm still enjoying it. We do a lot of family trips out of the boathouse and take a lot of people from all over out on the river, and really enjoy that.
This is Jeff Brokaw, who lives on the side of Latch Island that has the electricity. And Jeff is a fireman in Winona, and he's going to tell us about what it's like having a boathouse here on Latch Island. Hi, Jeff.
Hi.
Well, Jeff, tell me, what is it like here, having your boathouse on the water?
I guess it's kind of like having a cabin up north, but not having to drive 4 hours to get there.
Oh, wonderful.
Yeah, it works out real well for impromptu and, you know, being able to come and go as you please.
Uh-huh. How long have you had your boathouse?
This will be my 4th summer.
Okay, now did you build it?
No, I bought it from a friend of mine that had it, and he moved out of the area, and I told him that if he ever sold to let me know, and he sold.
Okay, so you got lucky.
I got lucky, very lucky.
Okay.
When I bought it, it was an 18 by 28 single story.
Mm-hmm.
It wasn't insulated, it wasn't finished inside or anything. And with the 2 boys, my 2 sons and grandson and so on, coming over, it got kind of crowded when everybody wanted to stay. So I put a second story, a 11 by 18 foot second story, which is a bedroom upstairs, and then Downstairs we put in a hide-a-bed and a futon, so we can sleep anywhere from 6 to 8.
Okay. Tell me how this works. Can anyone come down here and put a boathouse or build a boathouse?
No, in the Boathouse Association, I believe there's 101 spots, and I may be off on that number, but they can't put any more in than that, and the spots that are available are pretty much taken up, and people have them. Now, whether they use them or not, they're still assigned to somebody already.
So if someone wanted to sell, that would probably be the only way anyone else could get a boathouse down here?
Size-wise, you can't go any bigger.
Okay.
You have to keep your same footprint. And that's under the rules that the city and the DNR agreed to years ago.
Okay. Tell me exactly what it costs for you to have a boathouse down here.
Well, the Boathouse Association charges a rental by the foot. And it's not very expensive. It's probably $150 a year, I think I pay, something like in that area. And that takes care of our trash pickup and our porta potties that are up here.
Okay. And then how much land does that allow you?
Well, my boathouse is only 18 foot wide, so I'm 18 foot plus 2 foot on each side for a maintenance area. So I actually only pay for 22 foot.
Okay. Now tell me about the land itself. Now, do you own any part of this land?
No, the land is public park. All we have rights to is the boathouse and the water frontage, so to speak.
Okay. Now tell me about the electricity. Since you have one of the fortunate houses that does have the electricity, how does that work for you?
Well, it was in when I got here. The guy that I bought it from worked for NSP, so he put the system in. I need refrigerators and I need lights and stereos and stuff, so the electricity part of it is real advantageous to me. The poles, the service is put in to be above a 20-year flood, and so that NSP or XL doesn't have to come in and pull the meters. And when the water gets real high, I still have service. I'm still hooked up.
Okay. Now, how many of these boathouses actually do have electricity?
Maybe half on this end of the island.
Okay.
And I don't think anything on the other end. I don't think they have a service down there.
Jeff, what type of maintenance do you have on your boathouse?
Well, other than keeping the spider webs down, the barrels have to be, you have to check your barrels. They do leak. If you add more weight to one side, you have to put more barrels in on that side to bring bring it level. So, and then you have to make sure that they're all good. If they're not all doing their part to flotation, you start to, you lose them.
Now, can you replace the barrels yourself?
I replace all my own barrels. I buy them from local vendors here in Winona, and they're usually $4 to $6 a piece. And you seal them up and take a barrel popper, and you have to kind of shuffle them underneath. The ones in the center you can't pop. You have to take one from the outside and shove it to the center, and then pop a new one on the outside.
Okay.
So they get kind of recycled from outside to in.
That sounds like it's kind of a fun project in itself.
It's not bad when the water's warm, but it's a 2 to 3 man job because when you get a barrel under there, it takes 2 people to kick it around to move it.
Okay. What kind of hassles do you go through in flooding season with your boathouse?
It's a seasonal thing, but yet it's something it's not a big deal. I have access to my ramp here up to about 10 and a half, almost 11 foot of water, and after that you either have to walk in or bring a canoe in, and you can get on. It floats up on pipes, and the thing just rises and stays in place. So I don't have to worry about it going over the neighbor's yard or anything.
Sure. Okay. Now describe the downstairs for me.
It's 18 by 28, pretty much wide open. There's I use the couch and the futon as a divider between I would say the living room sitting area and the area that we use for like a dressing room and storage. It's kept open so that when I do burn the wood stove, I don't have to duct anything. I just put a fan on.
Okay. Do you have kitchen facilities in there?
I have a microwave, pizza oven, and a refrigerator. We don't have running water, and so all our water has to be carried over. So we have cooking facilities, but not kitchen or, how would you say, washing facilities.
So what do you do when you want to wash your dishes, or do you just use paper plates? Oh, you take them home?
A lot of paper plates, and then stuff that we do use we take home.
Okay.
And then wash them up and bring them back next day.
Jeff and his family obviously have the practical side of living in their boathouse figured out. There's a perfect-sized stove in the corner for heating, and above on the rafters, Jeff conveniently stores his mini fishing poles. There's definitely a cabin feel to this boathouse. On the knotty pine car siding Jeff has installed on the walls, we get a glimpse of what this family truly enjoys about living on the Mississippi. One piece in particular pretty much says it all. Jeff has built a unique alternating stair design in the center of the boathouse, which takes us to the small, unfinished bedroom on the upper level. Here there's a screen door to let the breezes in from the Mississippi and a small deck for a private viewing of the Wisconsin Bluffs.
Do you use your home all the time or just on weekends?
With the wood burner in there, I use it year-round because
do?
I can get it very comfortable, warm. We're over here 3, 4, 5 times a week during the summer. So I've always been a water or river person, and I really enjoy it. With the deck out there, we have a lot of friends that are into boating, and they stop and they pull up their boat and tie up and stay a bit, and then they take off, and another one will come. But the grill, we have a gas grill back there, and chairs and whatnot. So it's kind of like a, I don't know, it's getting away, but yet you're not away. Well, I keep my fishing boat here, and that's tied up all the time, so it's not a trailering factor, or it's always there, able to use it at a moment's notice. And I have a jet ski that we use, especially with the grandson, and go out and play. But it's nice just to sit on the back and have a cold one and watch the world go by.
Build my cabana by the mangrove tree. I'm gonna stretch out in my hammock to the ocean breeze. We're gonna set sail to the new horizon.
This has been Joyce Woodworth on Upper Latch Island on the Mississippi River. Please join me again next week when we visit Lower Latch or Wolf Spider Island and talk with several of its permanent residents. Till then, enjoy the Spirit of Winona.
Century 21 Golden Globe, serving Winona and surrounding areas. When it comes to selling or buying your home, we are your hometown team. And we think it's important to hear what you have to say, what you want, and what is important to you. Our agency's level of attention is one reason why homeowners rate us #1 in giving the best customer service. When a Century 21 Golden Globe sign goes up, our reputation hangs in the balance. We are Century 21 Golden Globe in Winona.
David, Vanessa, you got the loan. So we could start the paperwork today. I'll show you the terms that I've got available. Congratulations. Enjoy your new home.
Hello, I'm Joyce Woodworth. Welcome to the Spirit of Winona and the second part of the Boathouse story. In last week's show, we explored the upper part of Latch Island and spoke with several of the part-time residents who enjoy their home away from home on the Mississippi River. Today, we'll take a tour of Lower Latch Island, where the river homes become more colorful and creative, and most of the residents are permanent. Many of Winona's first settlers arrived in Winona by way of the Mississippi River. They came by steamboat and landed on the shores of our levee. They built houses, started businesses, had children, and lived their life in this small river town. Living in such close proximity to this beautiful flowing water, so rich in living nature, has lured many of Winona residents onto the Mississippi. Some used it to make a living in fishing or clamming, and some used it simply for recreational purposes. But no doubt people have been fascinated with this part of the Mississippi River since they first arrived by steamboat in the 1850s. They built their own smaller steam-powered boats for pleasure cruising. The boat had a wooden hull and a cabin with windows built on top of the boat frame, and people dressed in their Sunday best would cruise up and down the river. The hunters of the day built themselves a boat with a cabin on the top as well. They could take this boat into the backwaters, spend the night on it, and be the first ones to shoot the ducks early the next morning. These were some of the first houseboats. In 1905, a fun club was organized in Winona revolving around houseboats. They called themselves the Houseboat Hobos. They spent many days and nights living in their temporary home on the river, playing their musical instruments, fishing, swimming, and just having a good time. Their smaller boats, in the meantime, could be stored in a boat garage or boathouse, which was made out of wood or metal. These boathouses today float on the water by plastic sealed barrels underneath. The air inside the barrels provides the buoyancy to keep the house on top of it afloat. By the 1960s and 1970s, most of these boathouses were galvanized metal and used only to store boats. But an evolution began taking place with these boathouses. The lure of the river was strong, and the owners of the boathouses longed to stay for a while and enjoy the feeling the river gave them. And soon their boathouses became a galvanized party house. Shortly thereafter, the boat sat on the outside of the boathouse. The hole where the boat bobbed up and down in the center of the boathouse was filled in, and the boathouse became a floating cottage on the river. On the lower end of Latch Island, east of the old wagon bridge, is another island. From the water, it appears as one with the upper Latch Island, but there is an inlet that separates the two. This island is known as Lower Latch or Wolf Spider Island. It cannot be accessed by car and does not have any electricity. There's a floating footbridge that connects the two islands. And a footpath that takes you to the 15 or so boathouses that occupy this part of Latch Island. The path takes us through a beautiful forest of mature trees that offer a canopy of cool shade for the island dwellers. I choose one of the wooden boardwalks that leads to Chris Parnell's boathouse dwelling. He actually has 3 floating houses that are connected by floating docks.
Build my cabana by the mangrove tree. I'm gonna stretch out in my hammock till the ocean breeze. We're gonna set sail to the new horizon.
His homestead is artistically creative, and his welcome is warm and inviting. I have the feeling I'm in the Jamaican tropics rather than 5 minutes away from downtown Winona.
I'd like to introduce Chris Parnell, who has graciously invited us to come and look at his very interesting living space. Hi, Chris.
Well, hi. Well, thank you.
Oh, this is fantastic here.
Pleasure to meet you.
Oh, thank you. Well, Chris, tell me, what brought you to the river here near Winona to build a house or live in a house here on the river?
I came for a weekend to visit a friend, and got introduced to a friend of theirs who introduced me to the river right away that very weekend, and then just fell in love with it and been here ever since.
Wow, where'd you come from?
I was in Minneapolis previously, and by Morris,
Okay.
in Minnesota, at the university there.
Okay.
And it just come down to visit, and it was really interesting.
Mm-hmm.
And I stayed away from the water previously,
Mm-hmm.
and so I hadn't really spent any time canoeing or being on the lakes or anything. And it was just very interesting.
So this is quite a switch from not ever being on the river to just up and living on the river.
Yeah. So I stayed for that weekend and arranged things and brought my material goods and started camping out on the very end of the island here. And then on a house that was actually sunk at the time, and then we got it raised up out of the water, and things just materialized from there. It's been really wonderful.
Now, are you responsible for building these 3 buildings right here in your space?
Just 2. I've been working on the first one. Well, as I said, when I raised it out of the water, I started repairing it, and since then I've built another space that I've lived in for most of the time I've been here, actually.
Okay.
Because it was it was easier to heat and maintain. The other place was really difficult to heat because it's so large space. So I was taking way too much wood for the winters here on the ice. First winter I spent in there and burnt 6 cords of wood, and it was kind of futile. Water froze solid overnight, 5 gallons next to the wood stove. So that was kind of an interesting, but it wasn't going to happen 2 years in a row. So then I built a smaller place to survive until I fixed that up. And now it's gotten to be a very useful place. I have friends can stay, and Angela, a friend of mine, is renting it for a studio space to work in and write and do some painting. So it's worked out really well.
It makes a wonderful studio, doesn't it?
It does, and it's been rather interesting. It's gone through several changes.
Shortly after Chris moved into his geodesic dome hut on the river in 1984, he remodeled a small mobile home which looked something like a gypsy wagon. He added a loft on top and some barrels underneath. He dressed it up and made it his living quarters on the river for 12 years. Recently, it has become an art studio for his friend, who is responsible for the feminine touch we see throughout Chris's interesting space.
Describe what you do in the first one, the one that looks sort of like a hut.
The first one is a geodesic dome, and I'm basically weaving and painting in there, and we kind of use it for storage a little, because that's another thing that you gather up materials to work with, you need a place to put them. You know, and obviously here we can't put things on the shore, so because of the flooding, so we have to float everything. So I think it worked out to be a rather good purpose for that space. And I have a 16-foot loom, and then most of the materials are basically used baling twine that I go out to farmers and collect, and then dye and dry, and then use for the material for weaving. And, so that actually started in the 70s, and I was in Wales, and I ran out of finances for painting with oil, so the landlord at the time in the house had a large farm, very meticulous, and he always cut the string at the knot and would hang it over the stalls of the milk cow. And I was like fascinated by it, so why? It was just so pretty. So I asked him if I could have it, and he said, sure. And that started the weaving process going.
Oh, and you've made some beautiful rugs. The one you have in there now is incredible.
Tapestries have worked out really well, and that's a lot of fun.
Good.
So, and you can't repeat the same one even if you tried, so that's kind of nice in that sense.
So you're an artist, and you do paintings and weavings?
Mostly, yeah.
Okay. Do you work outside also?
Outside, you mean?
Outside of this beautiful setting here.
Yeah, I do some construction work for several other people that live in Winona.
Chris, would you describe your living quarters to us?
That's the house here.
Okay.
It was actually a boat garage at one point in time. I got it about 6 years ago and converted it.
Okay.
Well, there was someone living in it at the time, but it had basically pretty much been abandoned. And a friend of mine bought it, and I've since then taken it over and bought it from them and added pretty much everything to it.
describe what it's like living here in the wintertime.
Well, winter is really interesting because you can, at the right time, the right year, drive your vehicle here. It's the time if you want to move a wood stove or a piano or something heavy.
That's the
time to do it.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right, well, now describe what it's like living here in the summertime.
Well, that's pretty interesting too. The tourism and the traffic's really picked up a lot. The tourists are, seem to be more because I think pleasure boating has become a greater industry in Winona. We'd like to see more canoes and maybe a few less faster boats, but everybody's enjoying themselves, so it's a pleasurable place to be.
Now there's a no wake here past all your boathouses, isn't there? So
No,
it's not?
Well, we're working
you're
on
hoping
that.
for
We're
it.
hoping to accomplish that in the next year or so. Hopefully.
Absolutely.
We don't want to curtail anybody's fun. We just want to have a little respect. And there's 2,200 miles of river, and we have a mile here. It'd be really nice that we could just kind of go slow and enjoy it a little bit.
Sure.
It's we had the main channel got a no wake zone on it, so now people are actually coming through here to bypass that wake.
I see.
No wake zone. So that's pushed the traffic up to some degree. And we have children living here that are born here, and it does get rough.
Sure.
People are putting out some pretty big wakes on that level. Now, nobody minds if you're going by.
Well, other than the wake problem, tell me what it's like living here for you day after day.
It's very good. It's a pleasure. There's contrasting, one's in touch with the weather a lot more. The sun and the wind and the rain, and with those kind of things. It's a lot more interesting possibly than you would be. It's kind of in between being in the country and being in the city. I don't think there's any way to really define being on the water, because that's where we are. We are on the water. We're not next to it. We actually are floating.
Yep.
And that does make the difference. And then the wildlife, it's just incredible. There's the ducks. I had one hen that had 23 chicks.
Oh, wow. Well, now, I understand they're rather territorial, so they'll stay right here with you all summer, is that right?
Yeah, they are. They're eating in the house, actually, coming in and eating.
Come inside your house and eat?
Yeah, we could
Oh,
show
fantastic.
You that,
Sure.
It's kind of interesting setup.
Now, it actually sounds like more like a farm than a river to me. I hear chickens in the background. Tell me about your animals.
Well, they kind of come and they go, in a sense. I had a few chickens before, and then they dissipated, and now we have some more. We just got those this spring, and they're kind of fun. They're Aracanas. They lay blue eggs and brown eggs, and there's some rocks, and they're really nice. We like the birds. They just kind of add a little more.
Sure.
We had some geese for the first time, and they're kind of fun. And we have one hen, a duck, that's sitting, a Peking duck. She's sitting on 10 eggs. So I think Sunday they should hatch, hopefully. And that'll be interesting.
Great. And I see you've also managed to grow your garden without the soil.
We have soil mixed with some styrofoam, makes it a little lighter, and the roots still grow around it. And so it adds, so that way it's not so heavy. And we have peppers going, and some mint, and tomatoes. I think you could do a lot better, but we're kind of, hopefully maybe in a few years we'll get a little bit more proficient.
Now, I see so many creative touches around here, a lot of driftwood and a lot of interesting, creative ideas. Where do you get all your ideas? Do they just come, or?
The driftwood does.
Yeah, and then you grab it and just stick it on.
Yeah, some of it. As life goes, there's always changes and things happening in one's life. And I've always been involved in art since I was 11 years old. I saw my first canvas, and I've always been painting and so forth since. So I was in Holland in art school outside of Amsterdam in Holland for quite a while. Then I was in Minneapolis Art and Design for, a few years up there hanging out and so forth. So it's been really interesting. I've always been connected with looking and seeing and grabbing all the things. Have an interesting shape and form.
Well,
format, so.
Thank you for sharing this area. It really is. You can see it's got the artist touch.
Well, thank you very much.
Build my my cabana by the mangrove tree. I'm gonna stretch out in my hammock, feel the ocean breeze. We're gonna set sail to the new horizon.
In contrast to Chris Parnell's decorative, flamboyant, and artistic dwelling, we come to a smaller, more graceful dwelling and meet the craftsman, or rather craftswoman, who has built it and makes this efficient boathouse her home.
All right, this is Tira Falk, who lives in one of these lovely boathouses down here. Hi, Tira.
Hi.
Tira, tell me about the lifestyle down here on the river. What makes you live down here by the river?
Oh, for me, I think it's just the romantic beauty, moonlit nights, mist on the river, big herons flying overhead, just an incredible variety of birds that are all nesting and having babies up in the canopy of the trees. The seclusion, just the feel of the water, you know, it's a very soft, natural environment. I'm from Duluth, and, you know, so I grew up on Lake Superior and was around boats in the water all my life. I had a little skiff when I was a child and, you know, went out on the lake, and I think everybody loves the water, don't you?
Oh,
really?
yes.
And, you know, where the water meets the land is a blessed, sacred spot, I think, in all of the world. And I'm just drawn to that.
Now, your space is really very, very lovely.
Thank you.
Tell me about building it. I understand that you actually built your boathouse all by yourself.
I did, over a period of 8 years, though. It was a little bit rough at first, but just over the years, you know, Winona's wonderful for rummage sales and salvaging out of some of the old houses that they've been tearing down. And I just gradually collected windows and doors and, you know, these beautiful old antique boards and just put it all together.
Now, your windows are very unique in your house. Tell me about your windows.
Oh, you know, the Hosley brothers gave me those. They had salvaged those out of, I think it was the women's dorm, some building that Winona State redid.
And you chose to, like, put them in horizontally rather than vertically.
Yeah.
Right. They look very nice in your house.
Thank you.
Tira, tell me about how you heat your house and how you supply your lights, because there is no electricity here, right? So
No.
tell me how you generate your power.
Oh, well, the electricity is really easy. I've got a little generator and a couple of 12-volt batteries. We run our generators only about maybe 15 to 18 hours a week, and that keeps those batteries up. Most of us watch movies, have lights, you know, pretty much anything we need. And then, you know, while the generator is running, maybe, you know, you'll run the blender or the vacuum cleaner or something like that. But so that's a really easy aspect. And burning wood, that is probably the biggest challenge here, because we have to haul like 3 or 4 cords of firewood up from the landing in our boats.
Oh, okay.
So that's probably the most difficult thing. The propane tanks are a little bit difficult too, but that's the way we cook. And most of us have gas refrigerators. It all works out real well.
I love the construction and the different designs in your home. Like, it looks like you have sort of a Japanese motif.
You know, I think what went into a lot of like these little things sticking out is just living with the wildlife, because the birds love to sit up there and sing, and, you know, you can hang plants and bird feeders, and most of us have lots of bird houses, did you notice, around the eaves, because like the swallows come back every year, the same ones, and nest in the same houses. And so, you know, I wanted to blend with the environment, you know, be approachable for the wildlife.
And you've certainly done that. Now, have you made all your own tables and things
no,
that I see around?
rummage sale items once again.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'm very impressed with the neatness of your whole cabin. It's very lovely. Oh, Tira, tell me what it's like living alone out here.
Oh, I feel completely safe.
Mhm.
I have never had a moment of any kind of fear from anything, whether it be people, boaters, wildlife, you know, in the woods there. Plus, I have neighbors here, but I have never given that a thought. And, you know, that was really one of the most wonderful things coming here. I mean, this is such a splendid life. I think it's a real close-knit community. We help each other. You know, when we go through the floods or storms, your neighbors are really there to help with any fallen trees or any little disasters that may have occurred. Just generally a tight community, caring, supportive, considerate, and a real variety of interesting people, you know. But I came from Minneapolis. I lived there for years, and, you know, it was really getting kind of violent and kind of dicey and tense, certain parts of the city, and I came here, and we just aren't bothered by anything like that. There's never any theft. There's never any break-ins. Nobody ever bothers with any of our equipment. In fact, just the opposite. Everybody really watches each other's houses, and
Wonderful.
so, you know, we don't have any worries like that.
Well, thank you, Tira, for sharing your lifestyle with us.
You're welcome.
Build my cabana by the mangrove tree. I'm gonna stretch out in my hammock, feel the ocean breeze. We're gonna set sail to the new horizon.
One of Tira's closest neighbors is a gentleman who has been a permanent resident on Latch Island since 1978.
This is John Rupke, who has actually lived here the longest, right? From any of the other
That's true, right.
boat owners?
I've lived here the longest.
Well, tell me about it. What brought you to this area, and why are you living here on the island?
Well, I came to Winona originally to be a graduate dean at St. Mary's University. It was just St. Mary's College back then. And I was St. Mary's graduate dean for several years, and then I also became the director of the main house, which is a group home for boys in Winona here. And I hired somebody to work at the main house who was living in a boathouse on the river. And so he introduced me to this, and eventually I ended up living here.
So you've lived here since 1978?
78, right. I celebrated my 25th anniversary this summer. I mean, I grew up in Chicago, and my first introduction to Minnesota was when I was a teenager. Explorer Scouts came out on a canoe trip up to the Boundary Waters, and I thought, well, this was heaven, you know. This is not Chicago. This is where life is really happening. And to me, this is like living in the wilderness with your town 5 minutes away. It's like the best of both worlds. You're just surrounded by nature, and there's life all around. You can hear the birds. It's a little wren that's feeding babies in that house over on my house. Got swallows. I got a little phoebe, a little bird called a phoebe, and bats. I've got a duck nesting on my house right now.
John's binoculars permanently hang at his window for observing the abundance of birds and waterfowl that pass by his home. His view is spectacular. He overlooks all of Agamine Park, the Wisconsin Bluffs, and the arched wagon bridge. The serenity he experiences in this lovely spot in nature is shared by the mother duck that nests quietly in a storage area on the front of his boathouse.
There's mallards, of course, all around, and herons, and we've got a vulture, turkey vultures, and we've got, right now we've got a peregrine falcon that comes over and eats its pigeons on the power tower up here.
So you see it all, right?
So I see a lot, yeah. I see it, so, you know, and the river, the fact that you're living on a river, everything is continually moving underneath you. You're in a stable situation, but underneath you is who knows what's under there: turtles, fish, life, and the water flowing continually under you. So it's an interesting mixture of stability and fluidity.
Well, tell me about your boathouse itself.
There was a lady that was living in this over in Wisconsin, in the backwaters in Wisconsin, and they took her to court. So they put all the on-land building codes on her and said, you're not following the building codes, so you got to leave. So she came over here and parked her boathouse over here. And of course, it just so happened that at the time Judge Shalene was living in a boathouse, and so the Winona County authorities weren't too anxious to tell the county judge he had to go to court, and we kept saying, well, if they don't want us to live here, they have to go for the judge first. That was our little mantra. You have to go for the judge first, you know. So anyway, that gave us time to build up a little community. But my boathouse is really, it's an actual boathouse to house a boat. This is metal construction, and it had two big doors like you see here, and they could pull the boat in and house the boat, and so when I got it, it was basically, the inside was basically an empty shell, and I built the whole inside, and then eventually about 88, I rebuilt the whole understructure, the deck and the whole thing to make it last hopefully forever.
So you had carpentry skills, or you discovered carpentry skills?
I knew nothing. I was a brother. When you're a brother, when you're a Christian brother, everything's taken care of you. I mean, you've got carpenters to take care of that. You've got gardeners. You've got cooks. And so I didn't know anything. I can remember working on something here, and one of the kids from the group home who was at a middle school said, you're holding the chisel upside down. I was shocked when I went to the lumber yard and found out that a 2x4 wasn't actually 2 inches by 4 inches. So that's how naive I was about building. And so, but gradually, as I built, I learned, and people helped out. And so that's another thing I really liked about this place, is I could build the place that I was living in.
The permanent residents of Latch Island have all discovered a lifestyle that suits them very well. The lure of the Mississippi has not only presented them with a closeness with nature, but the necessity to live and survive in its environs. This has been Joyce Woodworth. Please join me again next week. Till then, enjoy the Spirit of Winona